in recent Little Rock forums, focusing on a variety of critical and compelling issues.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the students at the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service, I'd like to welcome you to this event. This is an event I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Several Clinton School students have had the opportunity to introduce speakers, but I come to you today in order to introduce one of my role models. I have followed Harold Ford Jr.'s political career since its beginning in 1996, back when I was in the 10th grade. When he kicked off his campaign to represent Memphis in Congress, I decided he would make a much better role model for me than Emmitt Smith. When he spoke to delegates at the National 4-H Conference 2 years later, I nearly cleared out an entire aisle of my fellow 4-Hers trying to get to the microphone to ask him a question. And when he kicked off his U.S. Senate campaign this past year, I was there hanging on to his every word. Senator Barack Obama spoke that day as well, so it was sort of a 2-for-1 special on role models for me. Harold Ford Jr. was born in 1970 in Memphis, Tennessee. He holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania and a law degree from the University of Michigan. When he was elected to represent Tennessee, sorry, I'm from Mississippi, sorry. When he was elected to represent Tennessee's 9th District, he was only 26 years old. During his 10 years in the House, he built a reputation as a moderate Democrat, having the ability to reach across the partisan divide in order to get things done. He was a member of the Blue Dog Coalition, the Congressional Black Caucus, and the New Democrat Coalition. In 2000, he was a keynote speaker at the Democratic National Convention in Los Angeles. He is a frequent guest on political commentary shows and has often appeared in numerous newspapers and magazines. He was also featured in my research paper for my high school AP government class, which was supposed to be done on a representative from Mississippi, but I told my teacher that I will not do my paper on anybody else but Harold Ford Jr. Despite that, I'm happy to announce to everyone and Representative Ford that I did receive an A on that project. We did it. In 2006, he was a Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate, seeking to accomplish something no African American had done successfully in the South since Mississippi's Blanche K. Bruce did it during Reconstruction. Though he came up a little short in his effort, his inspiring campaign solidified his place as a role model for me and other African Americans who have committed themselves to a lifetime of public service. He currently serves as the chair of the Democratic Leadership Council and is also a visiting professor at Vanderbilt University, along with being the vice chair of Merrill Lynch. However, I cannot wait to appear at his next campaign kickoff, wherever and whenever it may be. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Harold Ford Jr.
Thank you. Sanford's a good man. Give him another round of applause. He's a good young fella. I thank him for not only the kind introduction, but for being a hero of mine, too. There are so many people that you have in your life, and there are people whom are in your life, but you don't know it. And anybody associated with this school, as Dean Rutherford knows, and all the students I met backstage, and to the Attorney General, who's my friend, and Representative Jones, and other members of the political family here in Arkansas, even to Patrick Kennedy, who's got one heck of a name, I might add, your director here. Politics and public service, in a lot of ways, is about, you hope, doing things that help people or impact people in a positive way. And it's a very humbling pursuit, because oftentimes you just really encounter people who say bad things about you, or who have a microphone, or find a way to say really nasty or awful or terrible things about you. And oftentimes the things that you are committed to doing and things that you've tried to do You hope at some point that it finds its way into reality, be it a legislative proposal or, for that matter, even being someone that you may have had the opportunity to touch or be inspired by them and hopefully have some impact on them. I remember when I ran for Congress the first time, I was fortunate to be elected. I was 26 years old. I just graduated from a school whose football team won this week in Sanford for a change, Michigan. We go blue. We finally won a game, 2 in a row now. And I remember as I was getting ready to run, like a lot of people running for public office, you await invitations from any and every group that will invite you. And ordinarily, if you announce for State House or Attorney General or Congress or City Council or County Commissioner or U.S. Senate or Governor, whatever the race may be, school board, you await invitations from groups who have some stake in what it is that political body may do. So I was awaiting invitations from, after announcing for Congress, I'll never forget, I announced the Saturday before Easter in '96. And did it right down in Tom Lee Park, right on the muddy banks of the Mississippi. And it was muddy that day. And the next day I get to the headquarters and again expecting to have a slew of invitations from Chamber of Commerce's and Rotary clubs and women's groups and environmental groups and NAACP and Urban League and neighborhood groups and community development corporations throughout the city, even from colleges and universities in the district, the University of Memphis and Lemoyne on and Rhodes College and now Southwestern, then Shelby State, just waiting on all these invitations to come. And the only invitations I got really came because my elementary school principal, who was so mean to me when I was in school, the only paddling I ever got, she did. I was in second grade and was clearly deserving, but I didn't think that she would actually do it, and she did. But we remain, not only remain, she's my family's friend and was my friend and was a mentor throughout, and her spanking did a great deal for me. But I'll never forget her walking into the headquarters and saying, "Baby, I've got us some speaking engagements, Dean Rutherford." And I looked at her and I was excited. She goes, "We're going to do about 35 graduations." So I immediately had this young group of people. Steve Jones remembers some of this because I did some work with one of his companies in Memphis. And I looked and I said, looked at all this legion of young, excited people in the headquarters. I said, we ought to go out and get all of the voter registration forms we can get because we're going to register all these kids when they graduate. They'll be able to vote. Many of them might be able to vote in time for the election. If they're not already 18, most of them should be 18. And we want to make it as easy as possible. And my elementary school principal, Miss Jackson, said, "Baby," she said, "slow down. They're not high school graduations." So I said, there must be middle school graduation. So I said, they're going to have older siblings, their parents, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, others will be there. Let's still have these voter registration forms, have them ready, because you just never know what may happen. She said, "Baby, they're not middle schools either." I knew there weren't 35 colleges and universities in the district, so I said, "Well, what other?" She said, "I got you 3 elementary school graduations." So I was excited largely because I didn't really have any other place to be but those graduations because I'd not been invited anywhere else. So I wasn't that great at math, but I knew that 3 minus, when you take 3 from 35, you end up with 32. So I said, well, what are the balance? I said, we got 32 other graduation speeches. Where am I speaking? She said, "Baby, I got you 32 kindergarten graduations all across the city of Memphis." And literally, I spoke at every public kindergarten school graduation in the city of Memphis that year. And it was an amazing thing because when I started out running, and I was like anybody in politics, someone's going to be there to criticize you and tell you why you can't do it and why it's wrong and why you're not qualified. And I had a group of people being critical. My dad was my predecessor in the Congress for more than 2 decades. And there were people who were saying my dad was giving me a graduation gift because I just graduated from law school, that I wasn't ready, wasn't prepared, and a whole litany of things people say when, frankly, they don't have any issue or substantive reasons for being against you. They just talk about the personal things. And so I listened to all of that, and I was being criticized roundly, and the press would show up at these kindergarten graduations and say, "Why are you here?" The kids would fall asleep during graduation. That wouldn't deter me one bit. I'd keep going, and I'd shake the hands of all the parents and everybody afterwards. And I just tell them, like I told you, I said, I don't have any other place to be. Plus, education is what I care so deeply about. Now, God works in mysterious ways, because that was a forced answer in a lot of ways. I mean, it was true, education was a critical part of the campaign, but the way I would have drawn it out as an issue would be not speaking of kindergarten graduations. But that was what I was invited to do, and that was a part of what we were doing. But the Lord works. I'll never forget, in between one of these kindergarten graduations, my dad would ride with me sometimes in between, and we were in the car together, riding from Bethel Grove. I can't remember which school we were going. I was telling the story the other day, and I can't remember what school we were going to, but we were in South Memphis, and I'll never forget, we were right at Lamar Parkway on our way west on Lamar. So, a lady calls into one of the radio shows. And on this radio show, every day about this afternoon, someone would call in and be very critical of me, and would go on. And I would say to my dad, I know we have to have somebody that likes us. Can't somebody just call in and say something nice about us? And my dad would say, look, just let it work itself out. So if people want to call in, let them call in when they want to call in. If we believe all of these are planted calls, then people will respond accordingly. Lo and behold, we're driving from Bethel Grove to this other graduation, and this little old lady calls in. She identifies herself as a grandmother who had just been at Bethel Grove's kindergarten graduation. She said, I listen to this radio station every day, and it's one of my favorites. And I listen to this show. He said, but I got to tell you, I just saw that boy y'all were talking about speak at my grandbaby's kindergarten graduation. She said, he sat through and talked. Those kids fell asleep. She said, he just kept talking. She said, the teachers were fanning because it was hot in there, and he just kept talking. She said, when it was over, he shook all of our hands, shook all of the kids' hands, handed them all of their little kindergarten diplomas, and I want you to know I'm going to vote for him because of that. And I don't care what you say about him. If you all care so much about these things, you ought to be at these kindergarten graduations too. Stop criticizing him for doing what he thinks is right. Remember, the Lord works. I spoke at 3 sixth grade graduations. One of them was Roselle Elementary, now one of our higher performing schools, an accelerated school. And I'm in Nashville. I teach now at Vanderbilt. Taught last semester and teaching again this semester. And I'm in the sports store. I'd forgotten my shorts that day, and I wanted to take a run. I had a couple hours before class. I said, I'm going to go take a run. So I went to the sports store and bought a pair of shorts. A young man is at the cash register, and I walk up to the front, and he says, Congressman Ford, how are you? He said, I'm from Memphis. I said, it's great to see you. I shook his hand. He told me where he went to high school. He said, but I want you to know something. He said, you spoke at my 6th grade graduation several years ago when you were running for Congress. He said, I've never, ever forgotten it. So listen to young Sanford talk. You talked about your paper. It got me thinking about how you never know when an opportunity will present itself. In the strangest, weirdest of circumstances, out of defeat, out of turmoil, out of just difficulty, you never know when an opportunity may emerge. Because I never thought the kindergarten graduation speeches, when I first heard them, would really amount to much. But the defense that I was looking for in the campaign early on, someone just to come to my defense, came from the kindergarten graduations. And it's an amazing thing as you sort of think about life and think about opportunities, and more importantly, you think about the notion of leadership. I just had a chance to spend the morning with President Clinton in New York. He was kind enough and generous enough to speak at a Carbon Disclosure Project breakfast, or I should say conference, that we hosted at Merrill Lynch this morning. The purpose of this group, the Carbon Disclosure Project, or the acronym CDP, is to encourage large organizations to disclose their carbon footprint to help them develop a way to reduce that carbon footprint. And the president this morning, as he always does, was able to take a whole bunch of data that didn't seem to be connected and integrate it all and demonstrate how really there are more answers than problems if we're willing to look hard for them. And if we find them, having the courage and the dignity and the good sense to figure out how to scale it up so everybody's challenges and problems can be met and solved. And then listening to the group of students I had a chance to meet with, and just very briefly backstage, and I know I'll have a chance to take some questions here shortly. The group of kids backstage, as they are students, as they were sharing the unbelievable work that the dean and Director Kennedy and all Miss West and all of those who make up this incredible team here at the Clinton School what you're teaching these kids. Patrick was sharing that this is the only, I believe, program in the country, and you get a master's in public service. And a young man from Jordan, whose name I'm going to mess up, I think he said Lukman, I think is how he pronounced his name, he shared with me that there's a practicality to the program that he likes, or that is appreciated. It creates a volume of work, but at the same time there's a practicality to it and understanding how what you're learning, how you actually apply to ensure that we're able to get better results in government programs of that matter, figure out ways to make all of our efforts more efficient in solving problems. We face a big challenge on climate change going forward. We face a big challenge in finding new energy sources, which is a part of that climate change conversation. We face a big challenge in ensuring that our security and the world's security, or I should say those around the world who not only share our beliefs but share our yearning for a better way, that we find ways to give them the tools in which to build for themselves. The namesake of this school has done more than, I dare say, any individual in the last 20 years with his time and even his own personal resources to ensure that we have better outcomes here in America and better outcomes around the globe. I'm delighted to be associated with the school, not just because it's the first and only of its kind to provide or give young people a chance to gain a master's in public service, but because it clearly understands, the school clearly understands that for answers to emerge, you have to be able to bring an approach that's not Democrat or Republican. I've noticed some of the speakers that you've had, that's not conservative or liberal, but really an approach that diagnoses what the challenge is or the problem and figures out ways to make the markets work, make government work, and give people an opportunity, individuals an opportunity, society an opportunity to play a role in affecting the outcome in a positive way as well. I'm not a believer that you can outsource work that government should be doing to individuals, but I am a believer that when individuals feel compelled to make a difference and feel personally responsible or feel like they have a stake in the outcome of something that doesn't affect them directly, they'll force government to work harder to find an answer because they'll work with them, and they'll work even harder in their own lives to try to find answers to the challenges and problems that we face. I dare say to this group, I'm 37, and I don't believe we've seen in my short life, certainly since what happened around the entire revolution that produced so many jobs because of the way information is dispersed, the way information is gathered, and the tools we use to project it have really changed everything we do in life. We now find ourselves at a unique moment where if we put our mind to it, and if we find ways to make government work more efficiently, we can create new energy sources for us here at home. We can reduce the need for oil being not only a commodity that drives us to war, but reduce the value of oil as a commodity to suppress people's interests, reduce oil's ability to suppress people's lives, and more importantly, to retard the growth and maturation of a future generation of people around, or I should say the next generation of leaders in Asia and Europe and the Middle East. Just in Tokyo last week with our company for a little advisory board meeting with the leaders from the Pacific Rim, our leaders, our advisory board, who former CEOs of big companies, some of them's cars we drive and other machinery and appliances, and for that matter, electronics we use. And it was fascinating to listen to them, Dean Rutherford, because the whole purpose of the conversation was whether or not what's happening here in America economically, or I should say our economy, is decoupled so much from the rest of the world, namely Asia, that God forbid we face a recession here in America, how will that impact, if at all, the Pacific Rim? And to a person, all of them said not very much to none at all. And I found it fascinating that at 37 years old, I remember when I was in college and law school, and for that matter, just a few years ago, before running for the Senate, how the joke was if America sneezed, the rest of the world economies, the largest ones, caught a cold. And here we were sitting in our offices in Tokyo listening to leaders who run business, who built and run businesses, huge ones, said it really doesn't matter what happens there. We hope it doesn't happen to you all, but we are sufficiently independent and sufficiently divorced from a kind of dependency on you all that it won't impact our economies in any material way, or at least to the point that it causes a recession here. Now, I don't know if I fully buy the argument, but it's a fascinating position we find ourselves in as we try to do some amazing and important things as a nation. I believe, like the namesake of this school, that a strong America, the right kind of strong America, not just a pounding of the chest and a rhetorically strong America, but indeed a strong America where kids are learning, where people have an opportunity to work a full day and not fall below the poverty line, but have a way not only to support themselves, but to save for the future and give their kids a better starting point than they had. An America that is respected around the globe, not because we can blow people up, but because people understand our way of life is one that they too would eventually like. And that our embrace of market economies and our embrace of tolerance and our embrace of wanting to work with people and our embrace of celebrating how we're more alike than different is something they want as well. And we've got to, as a young generation of leaders, and gets me to my final point before closing, of why this school is so important and what you're doing here is so important, because the next generation of leaders needs to understand that we're probably starting at a greater disadvantage than any generation before us, just because of how we are regarded as a nation around the globe. The good thing about it is we're still America. We still got a pretty good brand. And if we're willing to be smarter, if we're willing to be more strategic in our thinking, if we're willing to reach out and willing to recognize that we don't have all of the answers, and if someone has a better answer, we ought to work with them. And if someone doesn't have a good answer, you don't shun them and shut the door on them. You figure out ways to work with them. If we figure those things out, not only will we restore the greatness of this nation or enhance the greatness of this nation, we'll make the world a far safer place, a far more humane place for our kids, for our grandkids, and for that matter, kids growing up all around the globe. What you're doing here is preparing that next generation of thinkers, that next generation of doers, people who hopefully won't be handcuffed or find arresting these incredibly polarizing political titles that are thrown around or political terms that are thrown around in the political debate today, but people who are more interested in just solving problems. People who are not interested in smaller government, who are interested in good government, and hopefully we can make it small too. People who want things, in short, just to work. Because when that happens, you find more Sanford Johnsons wanting to go home to be a part of what it is they're doing, not only in Mississippi, but hoping that he can impact there and everywhere else. You find more young people across the country wanting to give of their time, wanting to give of their energy, to make a difference not only in their community, but in communities all across our country, and for that matter, across the world. So with that, I'm delighted to be here. I can't tell you how touched I was, Sanford, to hear your introduction and to know that at some very, very small level, you not only followed what we were doing in Tennessee, but that you felt a part of it. I'm sorry I let you down this time, but we'll get them next time. Thank you again. You want to come up?